In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold.
Join in, my child, and listen. Digging through my old numb shadow. My shadow's shedding skin. I've been picking scabs again. I'm down digging through my old muscles, looking for a clue. I've been crawling on my belly, clearing out what could have been. I've been wallowing in my own confused and insecure delusions for peace to cross me over, or a word to guide me in. I want to feel the changes coming down. I want to know what I've been hiding. In my shadow, change is coming through my shadow, shedding skin, and I've been picking my scabs again. Join in, my child, my shadow's closer to meaning. I've been crawling on my belly, clearing out what could have been. I've been wallowing in my own chaotic, insecure delusions. I want to feel the change consume me. Feel the outside turning in. I want to feel the metamorphosis and cleansing I've endured in. My shadow. Change is coming. Now is my time. Listen to my muscle memory and contemplate what I've been clinging to. 46 and 2 ahead of me. I choose to live and to grow, take and give and to move, learn and love and to cry, kill and die and to be, paranoid and to lie, hate and fear and to do what it takes to move through. I choose to live and to die, kill and give and to die, learn and love and to do what it takes to step through.
The Abracast, occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
Hey, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining me for another episode of the Abracast. Of course, I'm your host, John Towers. So, I feel like I talk about it all the time. Talk about Tool all the time. The cold open was 46 and 2 by Tool, and I thought it was appropriate to open with that show because it's all about this Jungian idea that we've been talking about for like a fucking month now. This idea of the shadow. So in the red book that we've been reading by Carl Gustav Jung, he's looking for his soul, at least in the first part, which is the part we got through. He's looking for his soul through his dreams, and he's meeting these imaginary or personal, archetypical, mythological kind of figures, and he's talking to them. And I love the way that Jordan Peterson explains this. He talks about The idea, this Jungian idea of the shadow, is the very thing that you need to know is where you are least, I'm butchering Peterson, the very thing that you need to know is in the very part, the very thing, the thing that, beep, take 3, the very thing that you need to know is what can be found where you are least want to look, which is this idea of the shadow. So 46 and 2, seemingly, if you just go by the title, I guess, is about this idea of human next step of evolution. When we'll have two or an extra set of chromosomes, we'll have 46 and 2. So this idea that when we become enlightened, we will physically change, and that's kind of, we're going to be talking a little bit about enlightenment or salvation through experience. But upon reading the lyrics and thinking about 46 and 2, it's not really about the evolution, right? It's about the journey the guy is taking, to get there. He's crawling through his shadow, reconciling these different parts of himself. And, there's all this imagery of snakes and shedding skin and all of this stuff. The song is actually about the journey and not really where he's going. So I thought it would be a neat way to open. And I know some folks out there, like it when I incorporate tool songs. So I found this thing. It's a book called The Search for Roots, C.G. Jung and the Tradition of Gnosis by Alfred Ribi. And I'm sure the book is great, but we're actually going to be focusing on the foreword by this guy, Lance S. Owens. And it's checking a lot of the buttons a lot of the boxes we like to check here on the show. So let's just get to it, right? Foreword by Lance S. Owens. Number 1, Alfred Ribi in The Search for Roots. In November of 1960, 7 months before his death, C.G. Jung suffered what he called the lowest ebb of feeling I have ever experienced. He explained the sentiment in a letter to Eugene Rolfe. I had to understand that I was unable to make people see what I am after. I am practically alone. There are few who understand this and that, but mostly nobody sees the whole. I have failed in my foremost task to open people's eyes to the fact that man has a soul and there is a buried treasure in the field, and that our religion and philosophy are in a lamentable state. Looking back, now, over the last half a century, it appears Jung had reason to lament. He has not been wholly understood, but the cause lay not just in the sprawling scope and complex tenor of his writing. In retrospect, it is evident that Jung had not revealed the whole. During his life, Jung cautiously and consciously elected not to publicly share his experiential key to his vast opus, and he knew it. Too, would not, at least not then, be understood. The missing key was, as we now see, his long sequestered red book for the work Jung formally titled Liber Novus, the new book. It begun when he was 38 years old, based on his experiences carefully recorded in his journals between 1913 and 1916. Liber Novus contained Jung's account of a life-altering journey into the depths of vision. At the commencement, he called his venture, quote, my most difficult experiment. For over 16 years, Jung labored at calligraphically transcribing and illuminating compilation from his journal record into the exquisite folio volume known as the Red Book. And this was his buried treasure. It is the foundation of Jung's oeuvre and the Rosetta Stone to decode his subsequent Hermeneutics of Creative Imagination. Nearly a year after its composition, the publication in 2009 of Libra Novus had instigated a broad reassessment of Jung's place in cultural history. Among many revelations, the visionary events recorded there exposed the experiential foundation of Jung's complex association with the Western tradition of Gnosis, a perennial praxis he identified as the historical antecedent of psychology. I just like to take a break, and you're like, if you are like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? Hit up Abracast.com, go to the featured topic link, find the Gnosis section, and dive in. If you're behind on the Carl Jung episodes, find the Carl Jung episodes and dive in. Okay, back to it. To understand the whole of Dr. Jung, it is imperative that we finally delve into the depths of his Gnostic vision and the ways in which that ancient rhizome nurtured his life. This new edition of Dr. Alfred Ribi's multidimensional examination of Jung's relationship with Gnosis and its ancient textual witnesses thus comes at an important time. I'm just going to skip ahead here a little bit. This is talking about the book. Ribi and Jung. Alfred Ribi is a formidable scholar known to all those who have studied at the C.G. Jung Institute in Zurich over the last 50 years. His many books have, however, appeared heretofore only in the German language editions, and he has not received due recognition from English readers. Since the historical importance of this volume is uniquely interwoven into the author's personal background, let me here introduce Dr. Alfred Ribi and tell you about how this book came to be written. There's more stuff about the book, but there's some good info in here. Jung traces historical lineage of his psychology back to the Gnostic communities that had existed 2,000 years ago at the beginning of the Christian age. That ancestry was important to Jung. He asserted the uninterrupted intellectual chain back to Gnosticism gave substance to my psychology. Ribi took Jung's assertion seriously. He stands apart in the analytical community of the erudition and the intellectual rigor he has applied to the investigation of Jung's association with Gnosis, allowing that Jung was correct. Ribi recognized that there was a natural and fraternal dialogue awaiting exploration between the burgeoning field of Gnostic studies and the Jungian psychology. So here's Ribi addressing colleagues in the Jungian fold, or the casual reader seeking an easily digestible dollop of Jung light. His purpose is much more focused. Ribi is trying to open a constructive dialogue between Jungian and Gnostic studies. If engaged, that interchange will eventually expose a hermeneutics attuned to the experiential nature of Gnosis, both ancient and modern. Such a dialogue will broaden the foundation, cultural location, and imaginative scope of modern depth psychology. This is a transformative undertaking, and it is an undertaking true to Jung's vision of his work. But yeah, so it talks about the process and Ribi's process and the people that he talked to when he was writing the book. And this guy, Dr. von Franz, eventually provided Dr. Ribi with the rare opportunity to closely study Jung's private alchemical notebook composed between 1935 and 1953. Methodically working page by page through these notes and indexes, he observed the method underlying the development of Jung's Hermeneutics of Alchemy. He also discovered that throughout the notes, Jung continued to admix excerpts from Gnostic literature he was still reading, a revealing fact not previously known. Ribi was searching for the roots of Jung's psychology, and they apparently ran back 2,000 years to the Gnostics, Jung's purported first psychologists. It was time, Ribi saw, to extend the historical understanding of analytical psychology into the textual traditions of the Gnosis. To do this, he elected to employ the same method Jung had used in his study of alchemy, the method he discovered while scrutinizing Jung's very own notebooks. This was a natural continuation of Jung's prior effort, but Ribi now had available what Jung did not: an extensive collection. We know about all this of Gnostic texts recently discovered at Nag Hammadi. Although Jung had studied Gnostic materials for many decades prior to the Nag Hammadi discovery, there was a limited number of classic Gnostic writings available, and much existed only in the recensions composed by ancient opponents of this tradition. Jung had stated as much, and therefore correctly judged that he lacked the adequate primary material to solidly link his own observations and experiences with Gnostics in the first centuries. With the tradition of the Nag Hammadi materials, with the addition of the Nag Hammadi materials, the situation had changed, and Ribi saw the efforts. It was now both possible and necessary. All right, so I had to take a second and look up this word, hermeneutics. I keep mispronouncing it and also not entirely grasping what it means. Hermeneutics is a branch of knowledge that deals with interpretation, especially of the Bible or literary text. So hopefully I'll be better at that word going forward. Let's give it a shot. Towards the Hermeneutics of Gnosis. When I asked Dr. Ribi at what point during the course of his work he first perceived the importance of the Gnostic tradition to Jung, he responded without hesitation, "At the beginning." I then questioned if others around him in the Jungian community over the years had shared his interest with his interests or perceptions, and he replied, "No, only Quispel understood. He was the only one that I could talk with." Who was Quispel, you might ask? He was a Dutch scholar who in 1952, with financial assistance facilitated by Jung, acquired the first codex, as these ancient books are termed, from the cache of the Coptic Gnostic texts that were very recently had been discovered at Nag Hammadi, Egypt. The manuscript is now known as the Young Codex or Codex I. It was formally presented to Dr. Jung and the C.G. Jung Institute in 1953. It remained with the Institute until being repatriated to Egypt in 1975. This was the first portion of the large collection of Nag Hammadi manuscripts to reach academic hands, and Quispel was one of the first scholars to fully recognize the immense importance of the discovery. For Gnostic studies, Quispel would spend the rest of his long career working on the Nag Hammadi materials. With the friendship and assistance of Quispel, by then a renowned scholar of Gnosticism, Ribi met other specialists studying and translating the ancient library of Gnostic writings recovered at Nag Hammadi. Before the final publication, the entire Nag Hammadi collection in 1977, Ribi had read every translation and commentary published in German, French, and English, academic editions and monographs. Over the years, Ribi worked methodically through each of the some 50 Gnostic texts recovered at the Nag Hammadi, analyzing the traditions in various languages, noting keywords and concepts and reoccurring themes, essentially following the techniques Jung used in his study of alchemy. Ribi indexed the terminological interrelationships and the visionary formations appearing in the text. In the process, he compiled thousands of pages of intricate notes, all transcribed in a beautifully calligraphic hand. These notes are now bound in several volumes as a witness to his work. Ribi's study extended beyond the Nag Hammadi text to Gnostic materials that Jung had read, in a careful examination of the usages Jung made in his material. Eventually, Ribi established that Jung had understood the core of Gnostic tradition very well, despite his lacking the supplementary material from Nag Hammadi. While the Nag Hammadi scriptures were vastly broadened the textual evidence concerning the classical Gnostic experience, the writing Jung had available to him offered an adequate foundation for the conclusions. For the most part, the newly available text garnered support for Jung's reading. Throughout his labor, Dr. Ribi engaged in dialogue with specialists working in the still developing field of Gnostic studies. His interest was not only in their work, but also in sharing with them the psychological perspectives on the nature and the experience underlying Gnosis. The wider field of the Gnostic studies needed awareness of the psychological nature of this tradition. And in Ribi's judgment, Jung's hermeneutics served the need. The effort of Alfred Ribi, Quispel, and others with like interests, notably including the independent scholar. Oh, hey, shout out, here's our boy, Stefan Holler. And, of course, the globally influential efforts of Jung himself were not without effect. In 2005, Dr. Marvin Mayer, the general editor and primary translator of the definitive 2007 international edition of the Nag Hammadi scriptures, proclaimed that in Gnostic writing, the story is as much a story about psychology as it is about mythology and metaphysics. Gnostic writings are a story about psychology, coming from Marvin Mayer, the leading academic author in the field, and stated in an introduction addressed to the general reader. This is a transformational affirmation about the root of Gnostic tradition. If these ancient manuscripts reveal a story about psychology, then where in the modern world do we find a hermeneutics for, or an analog for their ancient psychology? Dr. Ribi offers an answer. The Problematic Heresy. Over preceding decades, Jung's connection with the Gnostic tradition naturally received comment, and occasionally it generated controversy. Plentiful evidence regarding his sympathetic interest in Gnosticism appeared throughout his published writings. More evidence came in comments he made in his private seminars. And then there was a little book he had printed called Septem Ceremones ad Mortuus, the 7 Sermons of the Dead, which at the very early date robustly signaled the Gnostic foundations of Jung's vision. Jung privately printed the Septem Ceremones ad Mortuus in 1916, not long after their transcription in his journal. In 1917, Jung added, "The sermons, along with an amplifying Gnostic commentary spoken by Philemon to the final manuscript section of Liber Novus, where they stand as a summary revelation of his experience Jung gave copies of his 1916 printing of the sermons to trusted students over many subsequent years. And H.G. Baines, at the time, Jung's principal assistant, prepared an English translation of the Septimus Sermones in the early 20s. With Jung's approval, the English edition was printed in 1925. It was also privately distributed for use by disciples who did not read German. Numerous individuals working with Jung in those early years eventually read his Gnostic revelation. In 1930, Jung began his intense study of the alchemical tradition. Over the next 20 years, alchemy's symbolic language was a central theme in his many publications. In alchemy, Jung believed that he had found crucial evidence for an enduring Western culture transmission of Gnostic vision spanning 2 millennia. Reaching from the beginnings of the Christian age forward to his own experience of psychic reality, readers of Jung often overlook the fact that his study of alchemy was wed historically with the Gnostic studies, at least in Jung's appraisal. Thus, in writing on alchemy, one finds an abundant reference to the Gnostic text presented with parallel commentaries. Near the end of his life, Jung affirmed that Anelia Jaffe, the main interest of my work is not concerned with the treatment of neurosis, but rather with the approach to the numinous. For Jung, this was the primal experience of gnosis. After a visit around 1955, his old associate, Carl, we'll just call him Carl. Carl remarked, perhaps partly in jest, that Jung then considered himself a kind of pope of the Gnostics. No joking was involved in 52, however, when the philosopher and the theologian Martin Buber published a vehement attack on Jung's Gnosticism, exposing pernicious heresy was serious business for Buber. Fucking Buber's assault and the publication of the evasive response from Jung undoubtedly dampened public discussion of gnosis within the Jungian community over subsequent years. But there were other issues at work motivating the animus of gnosis. Following Jung's death in 1961, the analytical community, along with a growing number of C.G. Jung institutes dedicated to clinical training, progressively became the primary custodians and propagators of Jung's work. Post-mortem, Jung was institutionalized. For the institution was persistent, and troubling issue was whether Jung's psychological work would be viewed as a spiritual discipline or as a clinically validated therapy. This is actually the reason they didn't publish the Red Book. They fucking kept it under lock and key. They wouldn't fucking let anyone look at it because they were afraid that it would invalidate all his analytical theories. Now, I'm not a Jungian scholar or historian, and I might have that wrong, but I don't think that I do. That's why it wasn't published until pretty recently. They were all looking at it going, when people read this, they're going to know that he was a fucking lunatic. There was obviously no professional profit in nominating Jung as a Gnostic prophet. Of course, many Jungian therapists continue to affirm the essentially spiritual aspect of their work, and they quote Jung in support. But culturally and professionally, it remains problematic to associate a school of clinical psychology with a widely anathematized heresy intimately entangled in the origins of Christianity. The publication in 1982 of Dr. Stephen A. Holler's landmark study, The Gnostic Jung and the Seven Sermons to the Dead, aroused a wider general awareness and discussion in Jung's allegiance with classical Gnosticism. Holler was, however, an independent scholar and a bishop of a modern Gnostic church who stood outside the established Jungian analytical community. For many, Jungian analysis, empathetic links between Jung and Gnostic tradition remain. I'm skipping that for time a little bit here. Barbara Stevens stated in her 2001 reassessment of the Jung Buber controversy, the issue of therapy as a spiritual praxis is the paradigmatic ground for, quote, holy wars, unquote, within a fragmenting Jungian analytical tradition.
Learn more at Abracast.com. Get bonus content by signing up for the mailing list. Get all that, plus many exclusive episodes by supporting the show at Subscribestar.com.
So I want to take a second to ask you guys, or remind you guys, to check out Abracast.com. Check out the storefront. Graphic novels, comic books. We got some great t-shirt designs. We actually have some alchemical t-shirt designs, which kind of fit in with this. And we have the alchemical process t-shirt, which is it's kind of like an Ouroboros, except instead of one snake eating its own tail, it's a winged dragon eating the tail of a clawed dragon, who is in turn eating the tail of the winged dragon. And there's some magic iconography in there. Also, it fits, since we're talking a lot about Gnosis tonight, is the Yaldal Boath t-shirt is on there. This shirt is striking. So they're on there along with all kinds of other great shirts. So check them out. Tarot cards are available on the storefront as well. There's a lot of Gnostic psychology mumbo jumbo in my tarot cards. At the very least, if you want to check them out, there's high quality scans of each card uploaded there. You can check out the designs before you purchase them if you would like. What else is there? Feature topic link, I already mentioned. Sign into the mailing list. And oh yeah, I am setting back the Mysteries of the Dark thing, but not too far. So check out the Mysteries in the Dark section. It's something fun and free that I'm doing. I took NaNoWriMo, which is National Write a Novel Month. NaNoWriMo, National Write a Novel Month, last year, which is November. I encourage everyone to participate in NaNoWriMo. I wrote a role-playing game, and I wanted to do a little bit of tweaking on it before I'm actually pretty nervous about it. Anyhow, check out the Mysteries in the Dark section. Check out the mailing list, the storefront, the feature topic link, all that stuff. You can find it on Abracast.com. Alchemical process t-shirts, Yaldal Boath t-shirts. I mean, I got everything you need. For spring. ML Bolex coming up. You need some embolic presents? I got everything you need right here. A Modern Gnostic, a new book. John Dorley, a Catholic priest and Jungian analyst, who has written extensively about the controversy between Jung and Buber, concluded that Jung's only proper rejoinder to Buber, strangely not made at the time, but evident in Jung's wider work, might have been, should have been. So what's the matter with being a Gnostic? That's going to be my next fucking t-shirt. Dr. Ribi is in essential agreement. Within Jung's own conceptualization of the term, he was a Gnostic, but a modern Gnostic, creatively nurturing an ancient and perennial Gnosis into a new time, and there is nothing the matter with that indeed. It deserves a much deeper acknowledgement and understanding than it has received in past years. In his exploration of Jung's Gnosis, Ribi artfully traverses the two places where the past ventures in this terrain have frequently mired down. First, and this discussion takes up approximately the first half of his book, Ribi dissects the multiple dimensions of the Buber-Jung controversy. His bold opening psychological analysis of Martin Buber, starting with his mother's abandonment of him, shots fired, is likely to raise a few analytical eyebrows and objections, but Ribi declares his biases and his intentions. He is a physician, psychiatrist, and a Jungian analyst with decades of clinical experience exploring the fundamental human conflict, and he is digging deeply into the psyche for understanding. To explain Jung's approach to the experience of gnosis as a psychological fact, he examines Buber's own encounter with an interruption of psychological facts, at least to the extent Buber publicly disclosed them. Buber diagnosed Jung as a Gnostic and Ribi accedes. But what then is the contradiction? But what then in contradiction was Buber? And why did Buber see such danger in the attitude he identified as a Gnostic? The real subject of interest, Ribi explains, is the light this conflict casts on a vastly larger historical story, the 2 millennia long confrontation between belief and gnosis. Check out the feature topic link. Catch up on all the Gnostic episodes if you're interested at all in this. And if you're listening this deep into this episode, I can't imagine that you have not listened to them or you're not at least interested in them. I mean, there's hours and hours of Gnosticism. It's Gnosticistic palooza over there in the feature topic link. In the second part of his work, Ribi offers a probing study of the Septem Sermones ad Mutoros by working together themes from the Septem Sermones, ancient Gnostic texts, and Jung's collective writings. He weaves a witness to Jung's intimate relationship with the historical tradition of gnosis. Jung did not have available to him the Gnostic text from the Nag Hammadi quoted Ribi. In this section, nevertheless, Ribi demonstrates how the Nag Hammadi material independently supports Jung's Gnostic identification of his psychology. But just as Jung did not have the Nag Hammadi text, Ribi did not have Liber Novus. Ribi intuited the power of Jung's experience during the period he was composing Liber Novus, the Red Book, and accurately regards the Septem Sermones as a signal of these experiences. He even identifies the volumes containing Gnostic texts that Jung had in his library and probably read during the period prior to writing the Septem Sermones. Nonetheless, Ribi was forced by the absence of the primary documentation material at that time still sequestered to make a provisional reconstruction of events leading up to the composition of the Septem Sermones. The depths Jung had probed and the power of his visions during this period simply could not be estimated. Only his private record could finally tell that tale. So it's interesting. I don't know. And this is quiet on the subject. So Jung did the Black Books. Now, the Black Books is a collection of notebooks where I'm not a Jungian scholar or historian. I don't know how many times I gotta say it. Not that anyone would ever misidentify me as such. But from what I understand, the Black Books were the notebooks where he wrote out all of his dreams and analyzed them and so forth, and then that was distilled into what became Liber Novus, or the Red Book. So even though the Red Book was under lock and key, I have no idea if this guy Ribi was able to, if he had access to even the Black Books. I don't know. Does anybody know? Please tell me. The suspense is killing me. The publication of Liber Novus now discloses the visionary foundation underlying Jung's lifelong association with Gnosis. This material supports and significantly supplements Ribi's study. In preparing this English edition, it therefore was clear that recently available material from Liber Novus should be discussed. That discussion could not, however, be integrated into the original text without radically altering the established work. Therefore, in an extension of this foreword, I will add discussion of Liber Novus and the story of Jung's initial encounter with Gnosis, putting the new pieces together with Ribi's probing exposition of previously apparent facts. We will see Alfred Ribi did indeed construct a bridge to the future. His historic study opens the way towards transformational understanding of C.G. Jung and the traditions of Gnosis. 2. The Perennial Rhizome. Writing in 1950, Jung explained his situation 40 years earlier at the threshold that he was of the experience that produced Liber Novus. The psyche is not of today. Its ancestry goes back many millions of years. Individual consciousness is only the flower and the fruit of a season, sprung from the perennial rhizome beneath the earth, and it would find itself in better accord with the truth if it took that existence of the rhizome into its calculations, for the root matter is the mother of all things. He recounts that the intense study of mythologies around 1911 forced him to conclude that without a myth, a human is like one uprooted, having no true link either with the past or with the ancestral life which continues within him, or yet with contemporary human society. Jung continues, so I suspect that myth had a meaning which I was sure to miss. If I lived outside it in the haze of my own speculations, I was driven to ask myself in all seriousness, what is the myth you are living? I found no answer to this question, and I had to admit that I was not living with a myth, or even in a myth, but rather in an uncertain cloud of theoretical possibilities, which I was beginning to regard with increasing distrust. So I, in the most natural way, took it upon myself to get to know my myth. And I regarded this as the task of tasks. I simply had to know what unconscious or pre-conscious myth was forming me, from what rhizome I sprang. So this was one of the most interesting parts of the Red Book, at least the first part of the, when I say, okay, anyhow, the first part of the Red Book, the part that we got through, one of the most interesting parts to me is him talking about this idea of imitating our heroes. And I started thinking about that a little bit. And it's just like, okay, well, you know, if I imitate my heroes, who were they imitating? And those heroes were imitating other heroes, and those heroes were imitating other heroes. And it becomes sort of like this Nietzschean time loop, right? Where, she's like, I don't have any real life heroes. My dad's a communist, but, I guess I have an art teacher, I guess, that was a hero. I have some guys in the army, I guess, would be heroes for me or whatever. But when I think of heroes, I think of like Han Solo and Smokey and the Bandit, Bo, the bandit from Smokey and the Bandit. So, and look, I mean, you could see where there's this cowboy thing with both of those dudes. Anyhow, I don't have this written down anywhere. I'm just kind of like riffing. But so this idea of the heroes imitate heroes, imitate heroes, imitate heroes, and this Nietzschean sort of time loop. I like that it kind of correlates with each other. And here Jung is telling us we have to kill that hero. We have to get away from imitating that hero and become a separate thing. That's one of the things that I got out of the Red Book that I thought was fascinating. Oh, you know what I was watching last night? I watched Evil Dead 2 last night. I've seen it a million times, but but working on all this Jung stuff, I'm like, Ash is a Jungian figure. He literally battles his shadow self, like first he gets possessed, and then he fights himself in the mirror, and then his hand gets, when the possessed bitch's head bites his hand, and then his hand becomes evil. And he winds up cutting off his hand with a chainsaw, and then replacing his hand with the chainsaw he cut his hand off with. It's a total Nietzschean figure. I should look. I wonder if anyone's written anything. Evil Dead 2, only 2. Because when you get into the TV show or Armies of Darkness, they literally turn him into a cartoon character. Like, they make him an idiot, where he's not an idiot in the first one or the second one. He's a guy, he's trying to get laid, right? He's breaking and entering. he's a little B&E. He's trespassing. But he's trying to get laid. He's funny, but he's not stupid. They don't make him stupid until he time travels. I guess I get it or whatever, but anyhow. Total Ash Williams, Evil Dead 2, total Jungian character. So, in the beginning of the night, 12 November 1913, and continuing over the next several years, he confronted the portentous task of tasks. C.G. Jung stepped to the rim of the world, where, as he declared, the mirror image begins. He called it the voyage of discovery from the other pole of the world, and he found his myth, the rhizome from which he sprang, and he explained, he reported in Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, the knowledge I was concerned with or was seeking still could not be found in the science of those days. I myself had to undergo the original experience and moreover try to plant the results of my experience in the soil of reality. Otherwise, there would have remained subjective assumptions without validity. In 1948, I described the event to Victor White. I wanted the proof of a living spirit, and I got it. Don't ask me what the price. The original experience and the living spirit of the depths had led him to what he avowed in 1916 to be a new spring of life. But from the very beginning of his Odyssey in 1913, Jung struggled with a rare hermeneutic task, translating his imaginative encounters, his visions, concretely into word and image. He had to plant what he had undergone in the soil of reality. The translators of Liber Novus comment. At the outset of Liber Novus, Jung experiences a crisis of language, the spirit of the depths who immediately challenges Jung's use of language along with the spirit of the time, informs Jung that the train of his soul, his achieved language, will no longer serve. The theoretical, didactic, and discursive forms of his previous scientific jargon would not carry the fact of his experience. Jung confronts the challenge before him in his introduction to Liber Novus, and he makes this petition to the readers for understanding. He says, "My speech is imperfect, not because I want to shine with words, but out of the impossibility of finding those words. I speak in images, which nothing else can express, the words from the depths." And this is something that you see when you read the Nag Hammadi text. You read these Gnostic things. text or whatever. I mean, I don't know. When you read the non-commodity libraries and you find into this thing where like these guys are getting this enlightenment from whatever's going on with them in the Gospels, this happens, and they're like, oh yay, oh yay, like they don't make any sense. It's like they receive their knowledge however they receive it, and instead of being like, yo man, this is what I think that the whole universe is like a tiny atom in the thumbnail of a giant. Like, that's not Gnosticism. That's like a stoner, right? When Gnostics become Gnosticized, when Gnostics become enlightened with their knowledge, they don't kick back and be like, yo, on your way home, stop and get me some Funyuns. Like, that's not the way it is. It's, they fucking freak the fuck out. You know, that's just my stray thought on this. Near the end of life, Jung spoke on his visions as the fiery magma out of which the stone had to be worked was crystallized. Jung's first task, his primary hermeneutic task, the first interpretive challenge, was a crystallization of the stone. The fact he would work for the rest of his life originated in a protean visionary experience playing out over several years. It was a descent into the mythopoeic imagination. He was compelled to give his experience expressive form. Early in the experience, Elijah had said to him in a vision, "Seek untiringly and above all write exactly what you see." But how would he put these words, the fictive facts of vision? In response, Jung entered an intensely focused and deeply considered formational process. The voice of the depths spoke in a symbol and image, and so the translating his experience did Jung. Even the graphic form of words on the page of the Red Book needed to speak with the voice of image. Jung further intuited that his experience of the depths was not unprecedented, but somehow linked with previous history, with the fact that he had existed as a lived event earlier in time. Where and how it existed must have been ambiguous at the beginning of his journey in 1913 and 14. Nonetheless, with parchment and paint and archaic calligraphy pen, he had to bridge with word and image a chasm in time, thus linking the past and the present and the future. The process unfolded in a dynamic progression as the transcription of the manuscript of Liber Novus proceeded. Parchment sheets changed to paper pages. In the Red Book, the artistic images he imaginately brought to form became more abstractly expressive, and the calligraphic hand became less cramped. Finally, around 1917 and 1918, a unifying symbol began to constellate in the form of a cross and a circle. And at the end of 1919, he crystallized in Liber Novus an image titled The Philosopher's Stone. In its sum, Liber Novus revealed these strata, but it is all stone from one source. This was Jung's primary hermeneutic of vision, the many-layered working of vision formed into image.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Send an email or visit us on social media to let us know what you think about this topic. And please remember to leave a 5-star rate and review.
Hey, so thank you guys for listening. I appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed this Red Book business, all this Jungian stuff. I have learned a lot. I feel like I'm in the same boat as I was. Well, earlier this month, I felt like I was in the same boat as I was when I started reading Thus Spake Zarathustra. And I was like, we're going to get through this whole fucking thing, everybody. Stick with me. So thank you. Please check out the website, check out the storefront, check out the feature topic links. And if you dig this, you'll find plenty of stuff that we've talked about this evening in there. There's a Gnostic topic column. There's a Jungian topic column. There's an alchemical topic column. Also, remember to check out the t-shirts. There's the Yaldo Boath, which is the Gnostic Demiurge t-shirt, which is fly, dude. This shirt is just cool. And then there's also the alchemical process t-shirt that's there, and that's really cool too. I appreciate it. Thank you guys for listening. Let me know. All right, see you guys later. If you're considering supporting the show on Subscribestar, let me tell you a little bit about what's going on over there. The Degree of the Red Archive, which is the $1 a month. You get access to some bonus audio, but there's also 50 plus hours of archived episodes. These are older episodes. They're not on the stream anymore. It's the only place to find them is in the Red Archive. There's a $3 a month tier called the Fellowcraft Degree, and that has 30 and 40 hours of exclusive Fellowcraft episodes. You get access to all of those. And those have never been on the stream. Those have never been on the normal show. They're exclusive only to the Fellowcraft Degree. $5. The $5 tier is the Degree of the Red Mark. And so for $5, you get the archived episodes, you get the Fellowcraft episodes, and then you are able to get some swag, bookmarks, temporary tattoos, exclusive tarot cards, all different kinds of stuff coming out every once in a while. And then for $10 a month, you become a knight in the degree of the Vessel of the Art. So the Vessel of the Art degree, you get the archived episodes, the exclusive episodes, the swag, and then you get like the keystone of all swag. You get your very own Vessel of the Art, which is a full-size, fully glassed mason jar with the Abracast sigil logo on it. So if you're considering helping out and supporting the show, that's where you do it, and that's what you get. If you look around on Abracast.com, you can also find a PayPal donate button. So if you don't want a monthly thing, another monthly thing to take care of, but you're like, hey, Towers is a good guy. I want to buy him a drink. You shoot me, not a coffee. I don't drink that shit, but you could PayPal me some money. All of your help is appreciated. And, that's it. I'm John. This is it. Like I said, I'm okay.